The Attack on Titan vibes that I got from this Hell's Paradise episode were amazing. We ended in the last episode with this giant monstrosity, like hands going through eyeballs. Like, we obviously were on an island that was going to live up to the name Hell's Paradise. Visually at face glance, looks beautiful, it's your vacation spot, but it's nothing but walking hell and abominations. And this episode, once again, this is the perfect episode to represent why Hell's Paradise is so good. There is just as much characterization, or at the very least flashback backstory to explain characters' motivations, as there is incredible animation of characters cutting apart giant monstrosities, using flames to erupt from the inside so their heads explode like a balloon popping, to just having characters walk around like they're in Monster Hunter wielding their own weapons against them, and it is absolutely incredible. Full live reaction is available on my Patreon if you're interested in seeing my full uncut thoughts. This was an amazing episode. This was awesome. There's great moments with characters like Sagiri, who this entire episode doesn't do a whole lot, but that's kind of the point. She's currently feeling out of place, like she's useless, she doesn't belong here, and by the end literally passes out, whether from fear, whether from exhaustion, whether from a creature nipping her in the toe. Who knows what exactly caused it? But at the end of the day, we're building into, within a couple of episodes, her to pop off and find her place on this island, as we currently have a really good supporting cast. One of the characters who I was kind of shocked they killed off last week, given that there was two beauties who easily would sell merchandise in a show like Hell's Paradise. One of which still seems to be dead, which isn't really that much of a shock. The Coruscant's death kind of felt a little too on the nose, like there's no coming back from that. But the other one, who just kind of had like a stab wound around like the shoulder area, of course that was a possibility, and she comes back and man, she is equally likely to kiss you on the lips as she is to stab you in the back, probably both at the same time. And I love the fact that we have a boy, Gabimaru. This man, he ain't having none of it. You can't seduce him. 3 different times he throws her ass to the ground and more or less says, "Wench, I want nothing with your servant. I got enough back home, damn it." And I think that chemistry, that bond is going to be great because we know both of these two are going to be badasses and they're going to be equally deadly. But there's going to be so many points where they both try to stab each other in the back, more so probably on her side potentially, especially given that in this episode we definitely see that Sagiri's words are really starting to hit home. Even though his training says focus on your own kills, he ends up thinking of his wife. He thinks of what she said in last episode, and ultimately he ends up saving her when she easily would have been cut down and killed in that moment. So most likely he will grow softer over the course of this and become more human and less of a killer. But nonetheless, it is going to be a fun dynamic, especially given that you have to have 2 guards on one woman because she either seduces her way to killing you or she's just such a violent menace anyway, she can probably cut down a single guard, so you gotta make sure you have enough. And it's gonna be fun. They start the episode with the man who ended up cutting off his hand because he ultimately got stung by that weird butterfly, which we learn a lot about in this episode. I love the fact that he ultimately got his death wish because he got insulted the fact that they thought he couldn't kill a dragon, so he destroys dragon statues at the entrance. And I'm like, that is an amazing reason to get thrown in the slammer. He got the 2 brothers story, which is really cool. Honestly, I was really impressed by how by the end of this episode, someone who I thought was just kind of a psycho who was biting people's throats out on the boat ride in, instead turns out to be like this big brother who does whatever it takes to protect his little brother. And the fact that the little brother became like one of those guards in order to infiltrate and save his brother, I thought was a nice hook and honestly just a badass. Literally, you have these giant titan-like creatures wielding giant weapons. That's his new weapon now. He's like, hey, what's better to fight a monster than to use a monster's weapon against them? That's what's great, right? People are going to hype up the action sequences because they're amazing, they're fun, they're exhilarating, they have AOT vibes. Like, that's not an exaggeration, that's not clickbait. Like, this feels like going up against giant titans, and instead of Levi flying around cutting off napes, we have Gabimaru come up using flames to burst heads up like balloons, cutting limbs off, or everything else that just made it so cool. But the great thing that I keep like hammering in these videos is that there's just as much attention put into the character motivations. The story hook is basic, but it's good, it's solid, it does what it needs to. Bunch of criminals on an island, fight to the death, find the elixir of life, grant your freedom. Most likely not that easy, and probably they won't actually give you freedom if you give them said elixir, but it's a story hook that works. The core thing that ties everything together is the focus and attention to detail put into the characters. They are just as important as the incredible action scenes, and that's what makes this exciting. While you're fighting, while you're jumping around, while you're having this beautiful animation and art production, you're like, this is exciting. And when they calm it down, you're like, oh, I see why this character's feeling this way. I love seeing Gabimaru have this, like, he's been raised and broken as a person to not feel like a person. But the fact that his wife and now Sagiri are getting through to him in these moments to change him into a better person, we see that as he's fighting a bunch of monsters. We see why brothers stick together and why the little brother thinks, you know what, of course I have to save myself. No, big brother just went to get a giant ass sword so he can save you rather than this broken meat cleaver. These are the moments that separate an action anime that's just fun for visual spectacle into an action anime that is just as good character-wise as any other character-driven story in an anime season, and this show slaps. The OST is heat. I still think it's one of the best openings of the season. Like, seriously, I think the best openings are Oshinoko, Hell's Paradise, and probably The Legendary Hero is Dead. Those three openings are just incredible, and I love how the opening's not a fluke. Like, when the OST pops off in this show, the OST pops off, and it feels just as great as the craziness we're watching. And I really like what they did with the world building in this episode. So I was under the assumption last week we had weird butterflies with human-like faces, stings you, and then you start mutating. Okay, don't get touched, don't touch anything here. Turns out those centipede-looking creatures are actually pretty mindless. You don't have to worry about them. They're creepy, but unless you're dead flesh, they're not going to touch you. So it made it a little easier, I'd say. It's a little harder on one hand because now you have to, because, if you see centipedes and butterflies, just start swinging around, cut everything out. But these little bastards can turn you with a little stinger into a horrible monstrosity. The big things, gross, probably still want to cut them down because I don't like looking at them, but at the end of the day, they have a good motivation of like, okay, it's not completely at the end of the world, these giant deity-looking humanoid freaks. Yeah, you probably want to cut them down just because they probably will try to hurt you, but your biggest threat are the butterflies. The centipedes, yeah, you can probably avoid it, as seen by our girl strapping up the poor bastard and doing a bunch of experimentation on him, a little savage, but I love it. Mappa is having a blast producing this. It oozes in the quality from top to bottom. I mean, honestly, I can't remember the last time I saw a studio do a boob jiggle on a character that didn't have at the very least double Ds, but Mappa said, hey, small chests matter too, and they gave that girl a boob jiggle that I was like, okay, I don't remember the last time an anime team cared that much for someone who wasn't busting out of their top, but bless Mappa, they know what the fans want, I guess. But this was a great episode. I loved it. I want more of it. We're now a third of the way through this show for its first season, and I'm already dying to see a second season. Thoughts and feelings yourself, though, down below. Drop a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here, ring that bell, of course, so you can get notified when I upload on the channel. And like I mentioned, we do have that full live reaction available on my Patreon if you're interested. And while you're there, you can also get a video shoutout. So today we have Flippy Napkins, Gareth Green, Hermes Hemp, and If Cho. So I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care. Have a good one.